Hey, welcome to Tia's Conversation Lounge. Thank you for joining today. I just wanted to hop on to say, to have a conversation about, the new movie Sound of Freedom that just came out, and some of the realizations I've been reflecting on, and some things I'd like to talk about. Um, Looks like baby's waking up. Not yet, but almost. Um, So the Sound of Freedom came out, and as you know, how impactful this will be. I haven't watched it yet. I still need to go to the theaters and watch it, or wait till it gets out because I take care of baby throughout the day. I don't know if I'll be able to go to the theater, but I do want to watch that movie because I believe that the impact of this message is so important for us to see really what's going on in the underworld and what's happening in the background. And it really shook me because this is like real darkness and evil that's in the world, and it's attacking our children. And this is where it really shook me because I have a son. And the truth is, when you have, in my belief, forces of evil or forces of the Antichrist that want to harm children, it's the reality of what's happening. And it happens in the most craziest of ways, like in terms of sex trafficking, but then you have the most subtle ways in which it can show up in parenting. And so I'm looking at this sinister force of evil and Antichrist and how it attacks children. Do you see how this thing is? Like, to harm a child and defile a child's purity, right? Rape, sex trade. Like, how sinister is this thing and evil to even do something like that to a pure child? And I must say, I am so floored by Tim Ballard's work, and I'm in such great appreciation and gratitude for his contribution for what he's doing, because it takes a certain level. It takes cojones, courage, and none other than the creator himself backing you up to do that type of work and be successful. And I'm so grateful. Hooray for the Christ, hooray for the creator to getting this movie out. As you can see, the type of forces that we're trying to pull back the curtain so that the public would not be aware of what's going on. And I'm so grateful that they pushed through and got this out in the public. It's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking to even imagine that this is happening in the world. We need change, guys. This is sad. When you have children, and there's still so much more. I think he said that there were so much more that he hasn't gotten to. And even then, even so much more that we don't even have jurisdiction over in the United States. So it's a sad situation. And reflecting upon this really makes me say, like, how can I be of service? And the only way I'm feeling now is like having this conversation and maybe donating, contributing that way, becoming more educated, because what's happening is truly an injustice to the purity of God and the purity of children and the purity of the light. And this to me, is such a direct correlation to how it attacks the foundations of a child and defiles their being, where they grow up with mental health challenges, And I could see the connection here with postpartum depression. And I'm not saying I have the answer to that. I'm just saying I believe, in my viewpoint, in my faith, that the Antichrist, it attacks moms at their most vulnerable times of sleep deprivation, of because you're bringing the child is pure light. They're coming into this world and they're like pure. They're pure, and here it is. A mom, just delivers, and they're, they're recovering, and they're, sleep deprived, and it attacks at your weakest, most vulnerable time, and it goes through the ego personality. I've seen it myself, and I've seen it in me, I've seen it in myself, and I have to constantly be watching this spirit of selfishness and rejection of the child. And so it's making me wonder, like, how is this force of evil and the Antichrist showing up in the epidemic of postpartum depression? Some women have psychosis where they want to kill themselves. What are the thought forms? What is the energy that would drive someone to harming a child? It's surely not the Christ. It's surely not love. So if it's not love and it's not the Christ light, then it must be the opposite. It must be the forces of selfishness, the forces of the Antichrist that wants to obliterate and kill the Christ light in a child, and or the purity of a child, or defile its temple. I'm watching baby; he's getting up. But I just, it's really a wake up call. This movie, and I'm really, appalled by the people who didn't support it, like Disney. That makes me question their integrity and their work. When you have a movie like this that's about to educate the public and they don't support it, that's a big concern for me. So I'm watching the monitor, baby's sleeping, so I just wanted to come on here and share, like, what's our public responsibility? How do we contribute to the shifting of this pattern? And how do we change it in our own lives? And that's a whole different conversation, but I'm just starting with myself, like reflecting on where is the Antichrist showing up in me? Where is the Antichrist showing up in my parenting? Where is the Antichrist showing up in my thought forms? There's so much to be said about this. Not even one conversation can start this, but I'm just starting to see the connections. I'm like connecting the dots, and I'm starting to see how much these epidemics, these all that women go through in motherhood, a mother and her child, and the foundations are so important. And to take a child and to do something like that, that's it's evil. It's quite evil and dark. And children deserve better. And how do we protect our children from this? And again, it boils back down to how does this force, if it's operating collectively at this level where there's a sex trade, right, that's harming children, how is this happening even in our own homes? These are questions I'm asking myself, because this energy, or this spirit, or this whatever you call it, this sinister evil, is operating in the unconscious. It operates in the dark. I'm just looking at all these different angles, and parenting is a place where the Antichrist is also impacting the foundation of a child. So I'm making the connection here. You have the sound of freedom, and you see the Antichrist attacking the foundations and attacking children, the Christ light, or the purity of someone's temple. And then here you have the parenting. How is it operating through parenting? And even just when a baby's born. Because, a lot of women suffer from postpartum depression for various reasons, you have trauma through birth, you have hormone imbalances, you got lack of support maybe at home, financial difficulties, sleep deprivation. You got a lot of stuff happening all at once in someone's life. The stress factor is super high. So would the sinister evil force try to come in at that time when someone's at their weakest point to harm the baby, put negative thoughts into someone's mind about their baby, create resentment or blame of the baby? When a child is crying, this is huge. This part is huge. When a child is crying, it brings up a lot of stuff, a lot of triggers. I've had this in myself, and I've had to work through my stuff to clear out my stuff, right? But it can trigger trauma from your childhood. It can trigger trauma. It could trigger things that, instead of showing up and loving the child, what shows up instead is anger or hate, or a feeling of helplessness. All of those things impact how we show up in the moment. And then the question is, when anger shows up, how do we operate? Do we let anger lead, or do we regulate and then shift? And that's the work of the parent, because if we let anger lead, then that's where the Antichrist can come in, because it can lead and it can hit the child. It can harm the purity of a child through those triggers. And these are the things that I'm discovering in myself as to the work that's needed to be the best parent I can be, to protect my child from the Antichrist forces, because its aim is to kill the Christ. Its aim is to defile the child's foundation and purity. I'm also thinking, like, we have different crises going on. We got this whole Sound of Freedom thing, right, which is the sex trade. Then you got postpartum depression, and then we have a global mental health crisis going on. How does the Antichrist force, how is that impacting the global crisis we have right now in terms of our mental health? So I'm just looking at it from a space of, what is the Antichrist? You may be asking, like, what is that? To me, my understanding of it is there's an energy, right, of that is in the unconscious. Somehow I notice that that's where it sits, and it is not love. It's self-hate. It attacks our spirit. It's not love, basically. It wants to harm. It wants to kill. It wants to murder. It wants to rape. It wants to tear apart free will choice. It wants to corrupt the temple. It is defilement. It doesn't respect the higher self. It is rebellion against the higher self. It doesn't surrender to the creator. It doesn't surrender to a higher power. It thinks it's a god, and it's its own sovereignty. It's a state of mind or consciousness. I don't know where it came from or how this thing originated, but I know that I've seen it in myself. I've seen it through my own unconscious, that there's something there that is not love, is not purity. It does not, it's not the embodiment of the Christ. And it operates in complete antithesis to the Christ consciousness, which is love and care and compassion and forgiveness and care for our brothers and sisters and acknowledgement of a higher power. The Antichrist does not acknowledge a higher power, or even that there is a higher power that exists. To some people, they don't believe in a God. That's their choice, but I do. I do believe that to deny the existence of the truth is Antichrist. So there are many variations of how it surfaces, but that is how I've noticed it. But in terms of what it's doing in this world, it's really sad to see what it's doing to our children and how it's impacting the minds of people and our minds and our mental health, how it's creating and doing its thing. And it needs to be stopped. This thing needs to stop somehow. I don't even know how to go about doing this. Only the help and divine intervention of the higher will, the creator, can I rely upon for assistance in this type of corruption and prayer. Prayer. Ask God for, I'll just pray. Ask God for support and assistance to deal with the corruptions and the evil in this world. More importantly, what I'm realizing is the importance of remembering who we are, and that when we know who we are, truth and love, compassion, the true nature of our higher self, and we work to include that part of us in our day-to-day lives, in how we treat each other, then we can start a momentum of a new way of being in the world that does not enable the Antichrist. And it starts within our own world by becoming conscious of who am I, and then how is the Antichrist showing up, and how am I allowing that spirit to impact my thoughts, and how I treat someone else, how I treat my child, how I treat, it just shows up in those subtleties. And by me making that change inward, and people making that choice, if they choose to align with the higher self and become the true self, then that is what can, I believe, transition us from an old way of being to a new way of being in the world, and one that loves and cares for each other, and all those wonderful things that the higher self is. So yeah, a lot to think about. So so I just realized there's only one enemy. There's only one enemy, and the enemy is that. It's just that. Anyway, I think I've reached what I had to say. I don't have anything else to say right now. Thank you so much for listening. Yeah, thank you for listening. And if you have any comments of how this movie has impacted you and your realizations or awarenesses, feel free to, leave a comment below. And thank you for watching.